Okay, so today we are doing 9.3 day 2, which is two-way relative frequency tables. I added relative frequency because that's kind of the difference between what we did in day 1 and what we're doing now. My learning goal, my objective is I can use a two-way table to find relative frequencies. Okay, so before we can really find relative frequencies, we need to know what they are. Okay, relative frequency is how often something happens divided by all outcomes. Okay? Okay, so when we're trying to find total relative frequencies, which is what this first one, so there's total relative, there's row relative, and there's column relative. Okay, so we're going to start with total relative. Okay, so that would be the distribution of data with respect to the total population surveyed. So in order to find that, okay, we divide every cell by the overall total. Okay, so that's that bottom right corner. Okay, so we're going to divide every cell, every box. Okay, if you want to say box instead of cell. Okay, so the benefit of this one that I have here is that they're all out of 100. And I know that percents, okay, so percent is out of 100. Okay, so when I divide this, okay, and multiply by 100, I'm going to end up getting whatever this number is. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple examples of what this would look like maybe if it wasn't 100. Okay, but so rides bus 12 to 13-year-olds is 24 out of 100, which I know is 24%. Okay, then so on and so forth. If I do 12 divided by 100, and look, I'll show you 12 divided by 100, that's 0.12, which if I change that to a decimal, or to a percent, it's 12%. So 12 out of 100 gives me 12%. So it's literally going to be all of those over and over again. Oops, yep, 50%. And then this will be 16%, 13%, 21%, 50%, 40%, 25%, 35%, 100%. Okay, so if you look, when you add the columns and the rows, they should still equal each other. Okay, because we're still doing total. That only works for total. Okay, so when I add up this way, 24 plus 16, that's still 40%. Okay. Okay. So when it comes to row and column relative frequencies, so and actually I'm going to cross this out. Okay. So in order to find a row relative frequency, okay, you divide each cell by that row's total. Okay, so when I'm going to divide to find the row relative frequency, okay, when I do this, I'm going to do this divided by the row total. Okay, and then the same going for columns. When we're doing columns, we divide the cell by that column's total. Okay, so divide each cell by that column's total. Okay. So here's my just frequency chart, my two-way table. Okay, so here's going to be row relative. Okay, so I'm going to divide each cell by the row total. So I'm going to do 24 divided by 50. So that's 0.48, which is 48%. So I did 24 divided by 50 because that was my row total. Okay, and I got 48%. Okay, so then when I do 12 divided by 50, I get 0.24, so 12 because 12 and 24 are in the same row, so they have the same row total. So that's 24%. And then if I do 14 divided by 50, that's 28%. Okay. So now when I add all of these up, because it was out of this total, this should all equal 100. So if I add 48 plus 24 plus 28, should equal 100, and it does. Okay. So then when I do 50 divided by 50, that's 100%. Okay. Okay, so then I'm going to do this, the does not ride the bus total, or relative frequency. Okay, so if you notice up here, whatever my numerator was, whatever number that was being divided, this number is just double it, and that's because 50 is half of 100. Okay, if you're ever not sure, you can still type it in, but 16 out of 50 is 32%. Okay, if you're ever not sure, you can still type it into your calculator. Okay, 13 out of 50 is 26%. And then 21 out of 50 is 42%. Okay, so now we can add. Let's check just to make sure Miss Hart did it right. I have 32 plus 26 plus 42 should still equal 100, and it does. Okay, so this is also 100%. Okay, now this last row is out of my total of 100. So it's still going to be the same as it was on the last one. So this is 40%, 25%, 35%, and this is still 100%. So now, unlike our total relative frequency table, I can only add across to 100. I'm not going to count my columns down and make sure those add up because I didn't take them out of the same hole. Okay, I can only go across. So my whole last column should be 100%. Okay, in a row relative frequency, last column should all be 100%. Okay, I don't know if you want to write that somewhere, add that in. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to do a column relative. Okay. So, now instead of dividing by the row total, we're going to divide by the column total. Okay, so now I'm going to divide 24 by 40, and I'm going to divide 16 by 40. Okay, so 24 divided by 40 is 0.6, so times 100, that's 60%, which hopefully will leave this with 40%. So if I do 16 divided by 40 times 100, that's 40%. So that when I do 40 divided by 40, that's 100%. Okay, so then 60 plus 40 does give me 100%, so that's good. Okay, so this next one is 12 divided by 25 and 13 divided by 25. So 12 divided by 25 is 48%. And then 13 divided by 25 is 52%. And again, I'm dividing by 25 because that's that column's total. Okay. And then if I do 25 divided by 25, that's 100%. So that adds up right. 48 plus 52 is 100. Okay. And then up here, I'm going to do 14 divided by 35 and 21 divided by 35. So 14 divided by 35, 21 divided by 35. So that gave me 40%. So hopefully this will give me 60%. Yep, 60%, which adds up to be 100%. Okay, and then because these are just out of 100 again, this is going to be 50%, 50%, and 100%. So now you'll notice that my entire last row is 100%. So last row should all be 100%. Okay, so it's weird. In a row relative frequency, your last column is 100%. In your column relative frequency table, your last row is 100%. So it's kind of weird. But if you just think about what should be adding to be 100, my columns should all be adding to be 100, which makes that bottom row be 100. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to answer some questions. It says, what percent of students aged 14 to 15 said they do not ride the bus? Okay, so this is of everybody. Okay, so what percent of students aged 14 to 15, so let's go back and look. What percent of students aged 14 to 15? Oh, no. So just of these students. So just of the students aged 14 to 15. Okay. So we're just going to look here because this is what splits my ages up. Okay. So of the kids aged 14 to 15, okay, said they do not ride the bus, 52%. Okay, so this part right here. Okay, so I was looking at so not of the total population, okay, but of those students who are 14 to 15, which said they do not ride the bus, that's 52%. Okay, then it says what percent of students who ride the bus, so here's the one that splits up, who's looking at, so like this one is my kids riding the bus is my whole. So there were only 50 kids that said they ride the bus, and it wants to know what percent of kids who ride the bus are 16 to 17, that's 28%. Okay. So it wants to know, is there evidence that there is a relationship between age and whether students ride the bus to school? So we need to determine if we notice a shift as kids get older or younger. So if I look over here, okay, my riding the bus as they got older, typically it went down. Okay. Oh, you can't see me pointing, I'm sorry. So as I'm looking at who rides the bus, okay, 48% of the people riding the bus are 12 to 13. 24% are 14 to 15, and 28% are 16 to 17. Okay, and then does not ride the bus was 32, 26, 42. So it went up. Well, I mean, it went down a little bit here, but then it went up, way up at 16 to 17. Okay, so now I'm also going to kind of just look back at my total and see if I see that same thing where I go down a little bit and I go up a little bit. So as kids get older, so yes, there is evidence that there is a relationship between age and whether students ride the bus, because we see that as students get older, less percentage ride the bus, or a lower percentage, okay, because we saw as they got older, this one, as they got older, less people rode the bus, okay? Okay, go ahead and do the U-try. It's long, okay, so you have to make a full two-way table like we did yesterday, then create your relative frequency tables, and then answer some questions, okay?